Hello and welcome to A Girl, a Guy, and a Buffy podcast. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Charles Swint,
Hey, and I'm Kate Balzer.
and we are two friends who have been watching Buffy since the beginning. We're not just a rewatch podcast, we explore the big bad themes of Buffy, and this podcast is full of spoilery goodness. So if you have not watched the entire series and don't want to be spoiled, then press pause now. So how's it going, Kate?
I'm good. How are you, Charles?
Good. So we're going to be continuing our conversation on our big bet theme of, family and friends and those relationships. So, um, this time, who are we talking about, Kate? What is our
We are discussing Buffy and Giles' relationship, and our question for this episode is, does Giles know best?
a little play on Fathers
Yes.
Know Best for those of you
Fa-
who are not familiar with that show. It was Knows Best is a American sitcom, and it was 1954. It was a 1954 sitcom that ran for 6 seasons. So we're just doing a little play on that, and it was one of those like family dramas. The question remains,
Yeah.
if does
Does
Giles know?
Giles know best?
Does he? I don't know. What are your thoughts? Does he know best?
Yeah, so it's interesting in thinking about what I wanted to say when we discussed this relationship and doing, looking back at my notes from rewatching, and I started to see the relationship in a different way than I ever had before, kind of in a much, t kind of taking a step back and seeing the big picture and realizing their relationship is so much more complicated, I think, than I ever realized before because they have like these wonderful moments and there's such a growth and a depth to their relationship. And then I just felt so betrayed by Giles in season
Mm-hmm.
6
Sure.
when he abandons her and then the way he treats her when he comes back in season 7. And like, I just personally, emotionally could never get over that. Like, I was always on Buffy's side. And I mean, I kind of still feel that way, but what I realized in thinking about the relationship in prep for this episode is that I think because the show never really had those deep conversations that people sometimes should or often need to have in their relationships, that Buffy and Giles never really figured out what they were. Like they started off as this, mentor mentee, but in a very high intensity, high stakes situation.
Mm-hmm.
And then Giles is because he's so repressing his Ripper side in those early seasons and I think he very much feels like he has to lock that down, toe the council line. So he's very like patriarchal with a patriarchal thinking for this like very old school, old world patriarchal organization but then feelings start to develop between them, like appropriate feelings,
Sure.
father daughter, um feelings that but that doesn't get like really talked about either. So they're in this like weird back and forth between like mentor, but he also has to send her off to basically war to die, but they're not really trained to deal with that emotionally. But then they become, he becomes much more of a father to her than her real father in these later years, but that's never really like discussed and dealt with. So as I thought about that more and more, I'm like, damn, they may be one of the most like complicated kind of entangled relationships of the series.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. There is something really interesting and delicate about this
Hmm.
relationship. That things and I noticed this in just doing some of the rewatching is that a lot of things with them get resolved with a look or a
Hmm.
glance. And I think that's a testament to the amazing chemistry that Sarah and Anthony have together.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just so well crafted that a lot of times their relationship is so close and their relationship is like they understand each other in such a way that sometimes they don't have to have those conversations. They just look at each other and they know. They have this knowing about each other. I think Giles early on really he comes into this whole situation being like, I've got to train a Slayer. This is my job. This is what I'm going to do. And then once he starts to realize who Buffy is, he's like, okay, everything that I've known as a watcher isn't going to work in this situation because every time I try to do the thing I'm supposed to do, it doesn't work. She goes off script. And but look at the success rate that we have with that. So I need to pivot. I need to make some changes. So we're not going to break out the Slayer handbook. We're going to throw that away because that's not going to work for her. And we're going to go off script and we're going to improvise. And I get to do that because I've had my rogue life as Ripper, so I can draw on some of those experiences and still teach her and be thoughtful while still trying to toe the council line, I think, in some ways. And I think he does. I think they do grow into this really loving father-daughter relationship, which is why he loses his job in the first place. Like that's why he gets fired from the council. Quentin tells him, like, your fatherly affections for her does not serve the war. It doesn't serve the cause. And so because of that, that's the thing that ends his yeah, and we can talk about this because this is another thing that I kind of got a little like I was not upset about, but it was one of those things that I had to think about from a different perspective is if we're talking, I don't know if we want to get here already, but here we are. Um, is helpless. And talking about like the complexities, and I say this to bring up the point of like their relationship can be boiled down to a look. So at the end of Helpless, like she is so mad at him. She is he has violated her. He has taken her power away from her. He has lied to her. She is so upset with him. She can't stand to even look at him. And it's not until the end when Quentin Travers is like, oh, well, congratulations, you passed. You did such a good job. Blah, 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 blah. And then he tells Giles that he's fired. And in explaining why, there is a look that Buffy gives to Giles that to me sort of softens her a lot to the anger because now she sees, A, how much he has sacrificed for her in the moment, even though he lied, even though he did the bad thing, it ultimately cost him something that he's done his whole life, the thing that he has trained for his whole life. And that is something that he has lost now when she has been struggling with losing the thing that she is supposed to be destined to do for her whole life, which is losing her powers in the Slayer. And I think sort of the mirror of those two things, of seeing the loss of their destinies, their duties, sort of softens everything and allows them to move forward. Because quite frankly, after that, there is no sort of repercussion or discussion about what happened in Helpless after that episode is over. They just move on.
Yeah, I mean, no, I agree. It's true. I mean, I also think it's a television shortcut to just resolve things with a look, and
Hmm.
I think it's a viable option. But sometimes I think shows, particularly back then, I think there it's changed a bit in television because we do talk about things more in general and we consider emotional and mental health more in general.
Hmm.
So that's, I think impacted storytelling, but sometimes it's used too often as a way of like just moving along instead of maybe having a conversation that's needed and would be interesting to see on screen. I think that the moment you're talking about, I mean, all of that obviously is able to happen is and she's able to have a softening of her anger in that moment because they have been building both a strong Watcher Slayer relationship and a more emotional father-daughter like relationship
Hmm.
in those in all the years leading up to that. I think also, I mean, you could interpret it as, even though I don't think it explicitly is shown to be this, it, I've always sort of, maybe it's just my head canon, interpret that as well when she does have that moment of softening and she realizes, oh, I'm not the only one who sees our relationship that way. So like this is real. Like he really does feel that way about me if other people outside are seeing it. But I
Mm.
also think earlier in this season, she had her own moment of betrayal when she didn't tell him right away about Angel being
Right.
back.
True.
So I always, and maybe it's not so much that she in that moment is having the realization, like, oh, I did something earlier. It's to me that those two moments bookend each other in this
Mm,
season. And so, and maybe also, again, this could be headcanon, but like you could say too, like maybe in that moment, Buffy is also realizing like all the times that Giles has either like forgiven her or said, I'm just here to support you. Like I'm not here to blame you.
right.
And like she legitimately has a case to blame him. It's not like he's
Sh
without fault.
sure.
But I think she also realizes how difficult of a place he was put in. I mean,
Hmm.
it's not even like he was facing a normal work boss situation. It's this, archaic patriarchal organization that sees her as a tool. And I think she also realized in that moment, Giles stopped a long time ago, if ever, seeing her as just a tool, as a weapon,
Hmm.
and is there to back her as a whole person, which is
Yeah.
a really, lovely moment. I mean, I think like a lot of the show, their relationship in some ways is a lot simpler in those early seasons, but it often can be when you're, you know, with a youth and an adult. As she gets older and she becomes more of an adult, that's where I think a lot of the friction grows. And I think it's more on Giles's side. Like he doesn't really know how to deal with an adult Buffy, like how that relationship changes. And I think that's very common in a lot of child-parent relationships. And
Hmm.
I'm on both sides. In this case, I feel like it's more on Giles's side than Buffy's. But I'm sure it's really, a little bit on both sides. But like trans making that transition from parenting to adult parenting slash being a friend. And not everyone necessarily can get there. Not everyone necessarily ends up being friends with their parents, but, so you don't have to get there. But I think you do have to figure out a way to be a parent to an adult child because it's not the same, you know,
Right.
at all.
And I mean, and in that context and conversation, it does come down to sort of like authority over autonomy. Like,
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
allowing both of those things to, like, I have to have authority over you, like, I have to have this authority in your life because I'm the watcher, and I've got tons of knowledge that you just don't have, and you're not supposed to have. Like my job is to do the research and to do all this other stuff and to have all of this information to share with you and to train you in this. But I also need to provide space for you to grow as a person, to grow as a slayer, and to find a way that works for you because this is the thing that's keeping you alive. My job is to keep you alive, for as long as possible and to fight this war. And and you're right. I think like he sees her not just as a weapon like the council does. The council is like, we're fighting a war and the Slayers and Giles says, you're waging a war. She's the one who's fighting it.
Hmm.
So don't make this like, oh, we're all in this together. You're not. And he sees that. And I think he sees how difficult it is to balance that situation. And as they grow up, he has to figure out how to navigate her being a woman. And I mean, and I think we don't see, other um we don't see other watchers, but like what does that look like with like Nikki and her watcher, how that relationship would have looked like.
Well, I mean, we know at least there's a deeper connection beyond just Watcher Slayer because we know that he raises her son
Right.
after she dies. So, I'm assuming that there was some sense of family between them as well. And obviously, we never know if Nikki was pregnant, which it's more interesting. I don't know that that impacts that story, but and then we have like very, just a hint of what the relationship was between Kendra and Sam Zabuto.
Right.
That was much more like obviously traditional. Plus, there's the like she's taken from her family and it's an honor, and her village knows about like what is slaying.
Right.
And then, I think we get the implication that again, there's a bit of a caretaker relationship between Faith and her first watcher.
Hmm.
Probably because poor Faith has never had anyone in her corner, and her watcher was probably the first one. And she's the only one who has a female watcher,
Right.
that we know about in canon, other than when obviously the evil X-Watcher comes into play. But
Right.
Buffy's only had two male watchers. Kendra had a male watcher. Nikki had a male watcher. We don't know
Hmm.
about the only other Slayer we really know about is Jingrong,
Yeah.
the one that Spike killed, and we know obviously nothing about her watcher. But I'm gonna guess he was a male.
Right. Probably, especially back
Being
then.
back then,
Back then,
exactly. Yeah.
it definitely. They were
Um,
like, women who?
yeah, exactly, right. They were probably the secretaries.
Yeah.
But even back then, you usually had male secretaries too. So, who knows? Yeah. So anyway, it's interesting. Oh, the other thing I was gonna say, which I kind of lost my train of thought, so this may be going in a different direction, but that Giles is kind of figuring out things as he goes along as much as Buffy is, because obviously the training he received is not even if she was like a more quote unquote traditional Slayer, it isn't training. He isn't trained to deal with her holistically. Like it's
Mhm.
like you're brought in, be like, just teach her the moves, send her in the right direction, and again, aim the weapon. And he obviously realizes like there is way more to this. And so he's kind of, figuring out as he goes along. And honestly, I think they both do really well in
Yeah.
those early seasons. Again, the conflict comes, I think, in later seasons, as they're figuring things out, as their relationship on all levels changes again.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I think he becomes sort of enamored and I mean that in like the least like romantic way ever, but like I think he
Right.
just becomes sort of like, she is charming and she is smart and she is quick and witty and resourceful and has all of these really sort of intrinsic, like innate qualities that will make her a fantastic slayer. And I think that's what we see is that her ability to improv in a situation, and to keep her cool by making like, quippy comments and all of that stuff is like, it's such a huge asset. And maybe we haven't seen that in other Slayers. Maybe we don't, they are doing things more by the book. Buffy clearly does not do things by the book because she was never given the book in the first place. So
Mhm.
she's been making things up as she goes along. And I think there's something incredibly, endearing about that. And I think Giles sees it and he's like, oh man, okay. You won my heart. And he gives like little, you see him sometimes where he gives a little chuckle at one of her jokes. Like he laughs at her jokes. He thinks she's funny. Like yeah, there's a very sort of like, it's a lovely relationship. I do. I think it's great. I
Yeah, I mean, I also think he, as a watcher, it is pretty impressive that he recognizes her abilities, and the way that she does things does get the job done, sometimes often in better ways than maybe following the prescribed training would. And the fact that he's able to adapt and see that and work with her in that way also says a lot about him just as a watcher.
hmm
Which probably actually is where his time as Ripper comes in as a benefit. Because even if he sort of shut that side of himself down because of how tragic the situation went with his friends and the fact that one of their friends, dies, um, way back when, before Igon comes back in the show, he still took the lessons that he learned from exploring that dark side, I think, to make him a little more open-minded, you know, whereas maybe another, obviously, like Wesley comes in. Oh, she's had three male watchers. I forgot. Um,
Right.
you know,
Yes, technically
and
three.
he's
Yeah.
so young and so inexperienced, and he only has the academy training
Right.
that he just 100% cannot handle that.
He was not the watcher. He was not ready for any of it.
No, I mean, he was the, teacher coming in on the first day, and those kids are running, him in circles.
Right. Well, he's top of his class. I'm sure he was top of his class at the Watchers
Yes.
Academy, got straight A's,
We know
was
he was
best
head
boy,
boy.
head boy,
We
you
know
know,
he was head boy.
all of those things, which is great. And then like it's like being the best at the, police academy or, being the best, in your class at med school. And then you actually have to like go into the ER and do some stuff and then you freeze up and you crumble and you fall under pressure. That's,
Yeah,
it's not that practical situation is not the same. Where I think where like you're saying, like Giles has so much more real world practical experience dealing with dark arts and dark magic and
right.
the evils of the world that he was way more prepared to fight this fight than Wesley was.
Yeah, absolutely. So then we move into some of the later seasons, which actually I really love how their relationship develops in season 4 and season 5 because they're both figuring out their place in the world in these new circumstances. She's an adult now and she's in college, and he's without the role he's had for years, and he doesn't have not only does he not have his watcher role and being a part of the Watchers Council, but the high school, they blew it up. He's not even a librarian anymore.
Right.
And he goes from being like a very important person, because obviously came became before he came to Sunnydale as her watcher, he was head of, of the British Museum, or he worked at a British museum.
Right. Either the British Museum or
Right.
a or
But obviously I'm sure he was like a lead in his field.
oh, I'm sure.
Obviously, so that's all like a massive change. It's like no wonder he was, struggling and flailing a bit. And so was she, because she's not really, unfortunately, the way her life is, she's not really meant to have the quote unquote normal college experience.
Right.
Um,
And
because she's destined to die young.
And at least she still has sort of that, she has that as an anchor, right? She still
Yes.
has
Yes.
those sort of traditional tropes to like fall along with
Right.
as an anchor for herself during all of this, which, is quickly ripped away once we get to season 5 in the body. Like that sort of throws everything off track. But I do think that it is interesting, like again, this and talking about like the parent-child relationship, like the sacrifices that Giles has made for her in order for her to grow and thrive, which is exactly what, parents, they say. I'm not a parent, so I don't know. But, they say you make these sacrifices for your kids. He gave, like, again, he lost his job because of what he did. He went against everything that he was supposed to do, lost his job. He did. He helped blow up the library, got rid of that. Like, of course you need to, like you have to, but that is also a huge sacrifice to be like, here's been my life for the past 3 years that I'm about to blow up. It's all for the greater good, but you still have to do it. And then, while he's flailing around, that relationship, he sacrifices her in that time because their relationship is not as close as it was. She doesn't go to him as often for things. She's, in this, new school. She's got Professor Wall. She's kind of engaged with that. There's a lot of insecurities that he has about that relationship and losing her to somebody else and those things. So I think there's a lot of that empty nest syndrome that he's got going on because all the kids are off to college now and he's, kind of hanging out and doesn't know what to do with himself. And that's got to be um, it's got to be pretty tricky for him.
Yeah, I don't see him sacrificing so much as the way you described it. I do agree in season 4, he's very much experiencing a version of empty nester syndrome,
Hmm.
as he and Buffy kind of recalibrate their relationship. When it comes to what happened after Helpless and the fact that he was fired from the Watchers Council, I see that less as like a sacrifice relating to the way a parent might sacrifice, as a consequence of he let himself toe the line to the Watchers Council for too long in that situation, when he should have stepped up way sooner, no matter the consequences, because it was the right thing to do. and it was what he should have done for Buffy and called the whole thing off. I mean, it's a stupid test.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. I just don't really see it that way. I do think, I mean, it sucks that he was fired, because, I think he's one of their better watchers, but I don't see that so much as like a parental style sacrifice
Mm,
or even like blowing up the school. What's interesting is for a man who has probably multiple degrees, even though they don't like say it, but you're not the head of a museum if you don't have some sort of PhD.
yeah.
So, it's implied he has, advanced degrees. It's interesting, and I know they did this for the story and the character development, which totally makes sense. Like the direction they chose, the fact that he's floundering in that first season. But it's interesting the fact that like one of the reasons Willow tells Buffy at the end of season three that she's choosing to go to UC Sunnydale and not go to Oxford or MIT is
Hmm.
that she really wants to explore the witch side of herself, and that there's a really good, some kind of supernatural related like studies program at UC Sunnydale, if I remember correctly. And so it's interesting that like Giles wasn't like scooped up, and or they didn't get him a job teaching, at UC Sunnydale, which
Yeah.
would have been, they probably, I don't know if they even thought of it. If they did think of it, I'm sure they were thinking we don't want to repeat the same thing where like he's a teacher at her school. But it could
Right.
have been interesting because he could have actually been like more celebrated, kind of the way Willow fit in so easily. In the beginning of season four, like college was like her time
Right.
to shine. I could have seen that happening too with Giles, which could have isolated Buffy even more. And so that would have been an interesting direction to take.
Yeah. I mean,
You
I
know,
always thought that it was like that was such a kind of a waste of time, or not a waste of time, but like where we knew that Willow was getting more into magics and things like that. What a great time for Giles to become kind of a watcher for her and
yeah.
to train her, and which would do the same thing, which could isolate Buffy, which could cause some, which
Ooh.
we could still get to like Dark Willow, and that even having more s- because of this time that Giles spent with Willow, like training her with magics and kind of ignoring Buffy, and that isolating Buffy and Willow from each other a little bit, um, to create some tension there. Um,
Yeah, yeah, and you could have actually like, if that had happened and gone into season five, and like say that the way season four ended, it stayed the same. So they do the joining spell, and Buffy realizes like there's more to being a Slayer than she has tapped into. So Buffy like takes him back as her watcher,
mhm.
and Willow gets jealous that she's lost her mentor. Yeah, that could have been like really interesting. Not that I want to like destroy the Buffy Willow relationship, but it would
No,
have been an interesting road to go down for sure.
yeah, just some exploration there. So then at this point, do we like, and we're in the in these, do you think at any point Buffy surpasses Giles in terms of growth in that relationship? Is there any point where,
I don't know if she surpasses. I think he fails her in season six and season seven. We're kind
sure.
of jumping ahead a little bit. Yeah, I see it more that way. I think they both have places to grow as individuals and in their relationship. So I don't know. I think in some ways Buffy has surpassed him as her watcher in her leadership because he forces her to in season seven.
Hmm.
And it would be one thing like it may be something she really did need. I don't know that the way he did it or why he did it is that was the intention.
Right.
So in that way, I do think there is something to what she says at the end of Lies My Parents Told Me when she closes the door on him and is like, "You've taught me everything I need to know."
Right.
Um, I do think that to a degree, but yeah, one and no relationships are ever static. Well, especially if you're a healthy person, like you should always be growing and learning.
Hmm.
And so obviously that's true with them. And in spite of, how their relationship deteriorates in season six and season seven in particular, they I could see them down the road, obviously, like especially if they have to post season seven, if they have to work out how to rebuild whatever the Watchers Council is going to be now.
Hmm.
He's really going to need to like step up in putting himself maybe in second place, even third place, and letting, like Willow and Buffy and Xander really kind of maybe take the lead in building this new organization.
And I mean, and that's essentially what happens, in the comics in those first
True.
few, like in the first few seasons. It's like Buffy is leading everything. I mean, Giles is kind of there as a watcher and helping training some of the new arrivals as they come in and is sort of the first wave one, but like Willow's off astro projecting all over the place doing
Yeah.
stuff. Xander's like leading the main army. And all of those things. And then, at some point, Giles goes off and does some things with Faith and
Right.
has, and a little side adventure with Faith. So I think it frees him up to do, that's kind
Hmm.
of his little retirement. He gets to do
Right.
the things that he wants to do.
But I think, though, I know we don't typically, well, we've sort of broken our like no discussion of the comics rule,
Yeah,
um,
all the time.
all the time. I know. But I would say on that, like my feelings on that is more that that's Giles still being isolated and probably himself not working to make amends and to rebuild the relationship. I'm not saying it's all on Giles. I think it's also the situation. It's like now they've got thousands of Slayers, and it's like we gotta again, we're like kind of in crisis mode. And that's part of the problem with this show is like you're always in crisis mode. I don't mean like the show's it's a problem, but it's
Right.
just like the world they live in. Like
Right.
you're always in crisis mode. You need those down moments, to slow down and to deal with things, whatever that is, whether it's, emotionally, physically, just administratively, in building a new organization. You can only be in crisis mode for so long.
Yeah. And yeah, I don't get the sense that any of those things are about making amends for what he's done for Buffy because I think like feel again like you're saying sort of the nature of television and how things sort of like we resolve these storylines so quickly with one simple gesture because this
Yeah.
one gesture is the thing that we just need to get back on track to move the story because it's when she recovers the scythe and she brings it back and after everything, and she's like, okay, I've got this plan. And Giles says, do you want to know what I think? And she goes, I really do. And I think, again, that sort of reset, like that one moment resets the relationship all over again.
It does, but it pisses me off because I don't think that is a perfect moment of where I get it because you're in a time crunch. So I don't mind so much in that moment, but like to me, they need a conversation. They actually probably need multiple conversations and they need to go to a therapist. But like, I'm sorry, like she should not forgive him that easily. That's my take on it. He really to me drops the ball in season 6 and season 7, like as a mentor, as a father figure. I understand he's not technically her father, but he obviously they have a close relationship. And the fact that he, even just forgetting the father relationship side of things, the fact that he abandons her as a watcher in season 6, and then particularly like, it's a great contrast. So anyway, that he doesn't provide, they don't have the language training he does. They don't have the demon knowledge he does, maybe except Anya. And if they had, incorporated Anya more, I could have seen that. But he just abandons her as a watcher when she still is fighting these battles on the Hellmouth. I'm like, I'm sorry. That is like so bad. I'm
I
like, dude, you effing drop the ball like big time. Big time.
I love this because I know this is your like sticking point.
It is.
It's the thing that will get you going every time, and I love it.
But like we kind of moved ahead going back to season 5. Season 5 is actually one of their best seasons to me of their relationship
Oh
because
yeah.
they find this really wonderful balance between like moving into a little bit of like adult friendship, but him still sort of having that father figure role in her life, but then also really stepping up as her watcher because she's stepping up. It's kind of like when somebody who is young is, really involved in something. So whether it's sports or dance or acting, and then they come to their teacher and their parents and say, you know what, I really want to do this professionally. Like I want to go for it. I want to try and like really steps up. That's what it felt like what she was doing,
Hmm.
really embracing that side of herself. And also it's kind of where she is bringing there's is bringing Buffy and the Slayer together. There isn't so much of that dichotomy of, oh, I want to be a normal girl, oh, I hate
Hmm.
being the Slayer. Like she embraces those two sides of herself. And then I also think he really steps up as a friend when she's going through everything with her mother. And then when her mother dies, he's really there to help her like plan the funeral, take care of like, the logistics that come after someone in that dies that you're responsible for handling their estate in a way that like he completely drops her in season 6. And that
Right.
being said, I know I get angry all the time because it does piss me off. I am sympathetic to Giles. I get like some of that for him is coming from the fact that he had to watch his Slayer die and bury her and like dead and buried. Like there was no plans
Right.
that she would come back. This wasn't she drowned for a second and Xander uses CPR to revive her. So I completely understand that.
Hmm.
But that being said, she's in such a horribly emotional place that it is so egregious what he does to me that it's just I have a really hard time forgiving him for season 6 and then
Yeah.
season 7. I think he's really hard on her too, in a way that's kind of unfair. And that I
Oh,
think
for sure.
drives her, so partly I think he drives her towards Spike because Spike is in her corner and Giles just feels like he's not.
Yeah, I mean, season 5, he is definitely like, I think kind of the best version after everything happens. I think you're right too that there is this like there is no longer the like I must protect my secret identity. I'm not secret identity girl. I am the Slayer. I am Buffy. I am this. And then there's all of these new engagements that she has to like face and come to terms with, including her mother getting sick and like Dawn being around and all of those things that weren't there before, that she is stepping up into a new role. And I think the parallel is that he then steps up into a
Hmm.
new role because he can see that, and she comes to him and she asks, I think in season and Buffy versus Dracula, I think
Yeah,
she
she does.
comes to him and says, I want to learn more. I want to get back to the slaying and the training, which I think is that, brings them back together, in a good way that allows them to train, but also to focus the relationship and the growth of the relationship, as opposed to them just sort of like, yeah, I guess I'm a Slayer some of the time, and I'm a student some of the time, and you're not really a watcher, and who knows what's going on.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we'll figure that out. So I am glad that they went back to that relationship, which makes season 6 so challenging and so difficult. Him saying, I've taught you all I can about slaying, which is not true,
Right.
which is, I mean, she does a great job on her own, but
Yeah.
just because you are an adult doesn't mean you don't need a watcher as a Slayer. Like that still, again, I go back to Nikki. Like Nikki's watcher didn't just up and go.
Hmm.
She was a grown ass woman with kids. Like there was with a kid. Like he didn't abandon her because of that.
Well, yeah, and sorry, I'm just going to say you just saying that makes another point to compare Bernard, which I forgot his last name, Nikki's watcher, to Giles. I mean, she dies and he takes on her child. Buffy dies, and does Giles step up to take care of Dawn?
No,
No. I mean,
not
he
at all.
leaves. He
He
leaves the first
leaves.
time, and then they have to pull him back.
Yeah.
Um, you know, so and like what the other thing I think the other part of the other reason his behavior pisses me off is Buffy has been disappointed by so many men in her life.
Hmm.
And and he was not that guy until that moment, until he leaves the first time and isn't there to take care of Dawn. He really should have stepped up in some way. And I think the other thing too that Buffy has proven what makes her so unique is she builds a team around her. She is not, I mean, yes, in the end it does come down to her, but she gets there because of her team. And the fact that he's like, you don't need me anymore. And it's like, no, the whole reason she succeeded is she's had her whole team around her.
Right.
You leaving breaks that team up.
And makes it a weaker team.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
Um, and I mean, we have some great episodes because of it, and
Yeah.
and of course we know the reason why that happened was because Anthony
Yeah, of
Stewart had
course.
wanted be to not be on the show as much
Right. He
anymore,
wanted to be
wanted
with
to
his
spend
family in
family.
England. Which
Um,
I like, I know I've said this a million times. I have no anger against the actor.
right.
Like I just think so okay. So, I always like we always bring whatever we're doing currently into these discussions. So, because I've told you a million times, I've been doing like multiple rewatch of Stargate SG-1. Well, I've never seen the whole thing through until recently. So, there was a similar situation with the lead actor on that show. It was Richard Dean Anderson. He wanted to spend time with his daughter. So they like as the show kept getting renewed, like they didn't it was like they expected season 7 to be the last, and then it got renewed, and then season 8 to be the last, and then it got renewed. So he started pulling back in like definitely season 8, maybe even some of season 7, and then was basically out in season 9 and 10. He showed up for like 2 episodes. But the way they did it, and granted, it's two very different shows, so like they were able to make it work in a way that made sense, but like they were able to make it work. I was
Right.
like, why were you not, I mean, bring a new watcher in, or like have her stumble across someone, or I don't know, but it just like the fact that he didn't do anything to help her out is it just seems so irresponsible as a watcher,
Yeah.
let alone like the, other kind of relationship they may have.
Yeah. And yeah, there could have been so much anyway.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think maybe, it's one of those things too, like if there had been a season 8 of Buffy, like, and they didn't actually work to resolve their issues, that would have even like really set me aflame, you know.
Right.
Um, because I can understand, like people are complicated, people are messy. So it's sometimes more so, it's not even I mean, a lot of it is his actions, but it's also more that there's no opportunity for her to like get any resolution with him on his actions and what happens in their relationship. I think that's the other side of it that like why 25, 20 years later, however long it's been, it still inflames me. Flames,
What?
flames
On the side
on
of
the
my
side of
face,
my face.
heaving, heaving breath, heaving, breathless.
So yeah. I
Yes,
mean, I say that with love too. I think I'm obviously so
sure.
passionate about it because I love Giles and I love Giles and Buffy's relationship. It's me sad.
Yeah. I mean, and they do have some, I mean, and because they have all of these great moments that like lead up
Yeah.
before that are just, that they're just there for each other. So
Hmm.
so instinctually,
Yes.
when Faith lies about
Oh,
um,
such a
Buffy
good moment.
killing, he's like, yeah, I got it. She's a liar. Got it. Done. We don't need to discuss
So
this.
good.
Like, it's done. Then she was like, when Buffy turns into Faith and they have that whole bit, like
Hmm.
that's one of my
Yeah.
favorites. Can't you just look into my eyes and be all
Right.
intuitive? Who's the president of the United States? We're looking for Buffy, just not a
Not a
concussion.
concussion. There was that time I could read minds, and my mom thought about you're a stevedore. What's a
What's a
stevedore?
stevedore? Shall I go on?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, great. Um, it's those things that make their relationship so great. Like she's
Yeah.
like you know, when Ethan Rain turned him into a demon and she just like
Yeah.
looked into his eyes and knew it was Giles.
Yep. Yep.
Um,
Or I know I'm going to repeat myself again. I've said this in a past episode, but I still the love when Giles takes her home after everything that happens with Angelus, after
yeah,
surprise and innocence, and he's like, I'm not here to blame you, Buffy. I'm just here to support you."
right.
Like he said exactly what needed to be said in that moment and like meant it. It wasn't like he was just saying it to say it, like to make her feel better, but like he legitimately believed that. And it was
Right.
so beautiful. And they did. They had multiple moments like that. I think on both ways. Like I love when we talk about, I think a lot about this from the Giles perspective, but when he goes after Angelus and Spike and Drusilla after Jenny dies, and she's like goes to stop him, and at the very end, and she's like, I need you to be here with me,
Right.
and not get yourself killed, basically is what she's saying. um it helps to pull him back in. That's a great moment too.
Yeah, because he's just off the rails then.
Yeah, of course. I mean, because
Surprisingly so. But
not only is like his potential, girlfriend getting her back, not only is she killed, but she's, displayed in this atrocious way, and it's a
yeah,
shock,
it's
and
it's
so of course
vile and
his mental state is irrational,
yeah, he's complete.
understandably so. Yeah.
So with all of that, so I mean, does Giles know best? I mean, in this relationship, does he know best?
I mean, I think it's like any adult child slash teen relationship, probably in those early years, obviously, because he's the adult, he has more experience, but he's also smart enough to listen and learn from Buffy. And then as she starts to grow up, that's really where the greater conflict is because she's finding, herself and gaining her own knowledge and experience where it needs to be more of a partnership, I
Mhm.
think, than, Giles is always the one who knows best.
Right. Uh, does Giles know best? I don't know if he knows best, but I think he's doing his best.
Hmm.
I think he's doing his very level best to train and mentor the Slayer in a way that's helpful for her, that is useful for her, that keeps her alive, and that helps her grow and thrive to be like the best thing. And I think he does a pretty darn good job of it too.
Hmm.
And I would say yes, until because I think it is a real, you know, D move for him just to be like, peace out. Bye. Gotta go.
Yeah.
Uh, you're adults now. You're all over 21. You no longer need me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, not, that it wasn't a cool thing, and it left them vulnerable. It left them
Hmm.
very, very vulnerable,
Yeah.
um, in so many ways that was harmful to the group.
Yeah.
To Buffy's mental state, to her physical well-being, to Willow, to Tara. Like all of that happened while he was gone. So, um,
Hmm.
is he responsible for that? No. But also that's also kind of what happens when you kind of go away and you don't have your parent figure around all the time. You make
Hmm.
mistakes and things get messy and ugly and it might get a little dark. And that's so I understand the reasoning behind why we get all of that. But I don't think he needed to all of that probably could have still happened, but he didn't need to be gone as much as he was. So um
Yeah, I mean, I think by the end, and this is again kind of ticks me off because it's like a throwaway moment to some degree after they've got Willow contained for the moment when Giles shows up. He basically does say, I think I made the wrong decision.
mhm.
So he understands that, but that's like all we get. And I'm like, no, we should have had more than that. We needed a deeper conversation.
Kate wants an entire monologue
Mhm.
from
I don't
Giles
know. I kind of want
with an
like I
apology.
want basically like a moment, the moment that Buffy had with Riley after she finds out he went to the Bite House and he comes and finds her in the back room of the magic box and she goes at it with him. I'm like, I wanted that kind of moment between her and Giles, but that's just me.
Not going to be your new fanfic.
Exactly. Right. Yes,
I want a new
exactly.
scripted.
So if you feel that same way, let us know. Is
Yes.
anyone on my side?
I'm sure there's lots of people who are for sure because it really is kind of just it was a horrendous thing
Yeah.
that he did in that
I just got
moment.
no like satisfactual resolution. I don't know. Am I
Yeah.
saying the words right?
Satis
Yes.
yeah.
Um,
Satisfaction is not guaranteed in this
yeah.
moment.
But we have other great satisfying moments. So I was like, it's not like the
Yeah.
show doesn't give it to us. I was like,
Yeah.
that is one I wanted, and they did not give it to me.
I mean, and they push the boundaries of that relationship so much too. And they really, I mean, even in season 7 with everything with Spike, where he
Yeah.
sends Spike off to get killed by Robin, like there's so much stuff that's like, dude, that's real messed up.
Super messed up. Oh, we didn't even talk about that from that
That's our boy.
perspective.
You know that's our boy. And so why are you like, what kind of selfish thing are you doing in this
Mhm.
situation when you need all the fighters that you can get?
Well, and
And
even
it
if,
just, yeah,
oh,
it just
sorry, go
doesn't make
ahead.
sense to
Sorry.
me. No, go for it.
No, I was gonna say, even if there was like to some degree he's not necessarily wrong, but to do that, to go behind her back in that way, and then I mean it's just it's it's honestly almost as bad as helpless.
There's so
Which,
many times where he breaks her trust, where it's just
correct.
like, I mean, and again, she has done it too. She has broken
Sure.
his trust, um,
But I
on
feel
some
like,
things, but she
sorry,
owns up to it.
well, yeah, but I was also going to say a lot of times I feel like she does it when she's younger and she's still learning. And again,
Hmm.
not that at his age shouldn't also still be learning, but I feel like he does it from such a like cold, calculated
Yeah,
watcher mentality versus she's just young and making mistakes.
yeah, yeah. He's intentionally doing
Hmm.
harmful things,
Hmm.
where she does harmful things because she just doesn't realize the consequences of what
Hmm.
those actions would look like.
Yeah,
Um,
agreed.
he knew he Giles does know best, but he should know better.
So good. I love that. Yes, he should know better.
Giles doesn't know best, but he should know better.
Yes.
Um,
Do better, Giles.
do better. So yes. So tell us what you all think. We would love to hear what you all have to think about the relationship between Buffy and Giles, and does
Yeah.
does Giles know best?
Does Giles know best? Yeah, so let us know your thoughts. You can email us at abuffypodcast@gmail.com. And if you're not already doing so, please follow us on social media. We are on Instagram and Facebook at a Buffy Podcast. And of course, please rate, review us wherever you listen to your podcast. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. And if you have other Buffy fans in your life who are not listening, please let them know about us. We would greatly appreciate it. And hope you enjoy the conversation. And we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.